I'm glad you found the frequency today. Last week we released episode 1. Moving forward, you can expect shorter weekly recordings, keeping the signal active. Some weeks it'll be a news dispatch like we're doing today. Other weeks we'll dig into the archives for a bit of hunting history, or maybe a session of Wildly Gourmet. Our full-length episodes will drop monthly. Look for episode 2 in April. But in between, like I said, we'll be right here every single week with an update. Looks like there's a lot moving across the wire. The decisions made this week in state houses and on federal lands will determine the opportunities we have for years to come. The wood is dry. The signal's strong. Let's get rolling. This is the Field Standard Podcast, home of the sporting conservationist. And we're broadcasting from the edge of the civilized world.
I cut it up with a chainsaw.
Oh, there we go, boy!
The fish is way down there.
There you go.
And this is your outdoor news, covering issues that impact your life, your hunting, and your fishing. We've got a lot of ground to cover today, from West Texas to the Boundary Waters, with stops along the way for little bass fishing and dam removals. But first, let's start with the lead story coming out of Washington. This past Wednesday, March 18th, the House of Representatives passed House Bill 556, the Protecting Access for Hunters and Anglers Act. The final vote was 215 to 202. It now heads to the Senate. This bill is a line in the sand. It's designed to stop federal agencies from imposing blanket bans, specifically on lead ammunition and tackle on federal lands, unless the ban is consistent with state law and supportive of site-specific peer-reviewed science. For those who've been in the field a few decades, this could feel like the 1991 waterfowl steel shot rewind. That ban wasn't just a policy shift, it was a total culture shock. Now, when we talk about lead ban, there are two very distinct sides to this argument. On one hand, the proponent's position is rooted in toxicology. Groups like the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service point to decades of research showing that spent lead is being ingested by birds like loons and swans or scavengers like the California condor. They argue that the population level decline is real and that moving to non-toxic alternatives is the only way to protect the chain. On the other hand, the opposition says this is an issue of access and overreach. Hunters and state agencies argue that blanket bans are often political rather than biological. They point to the pocketbook reality. Non-toxic ammo is significantly more expensive. If you force a transition before the market is ready, you price people out of the field, which is what happened in 1991. And don't forget, we're the ones footing the bill for conservation. Every time you buy a box of shells, you're paying that Pittman-Robertson tax. That's the engine that drives state conservation, and if we price hunters out, that engine could stall. Before we go further, in the spirit of full disclosure, let me say, I'm not a fan of federal overreach, but this one doesn't really impact me, because for the most part, I've already switched to lead-free. Now let me tell you why I've been using tungsten steel blends, bismuth, and copper. I think the new technology for these shots makes them highly effective, and yes, the shot does cost more, but I just have to choose my shots more wisely. And most importantly, the food I put on my family's plate is lead-free. This was my main reason for making the switch. Okay, before we close this story out, let's look at the history here, because if you want to know where we're going, you have to look at 1991. Before the ban, it was estimated that 1.6 to 3.8 million waterfowl died annually from lead poisoning in North America. These birds weren't being harvested. They were ingesting spent pellets, mistaking them for grit. By the time the ban was fully implemented in 91, researchers saw a nearly 50% reduction in lead-related mortality almost immediately. But 91 is also famous for being the year active duck hunters bottomed out. In the 70s, active duck hunting community numbered around 2.4 million. By 1991, that number plummeted to 1 million. That's a whopping loss of 50% of the hunting base in less than 2 decades. Back then, steel shot was 2 to 3 times more expensive than lead. Hunters feared steel would destroy their old barrels. It acted as a massive financial tax on the sport. Interestingly, one of the loudest arguments against the ban was crippling rates. The argument was that steel was not effective as lead and more birds would be crippled. Well, pre-ban crippling rates were around 23%, Post-ban, they dropped to 15%. Could be only the best duck hunters were still hunting. Who knows? Either way, reports say that a change in shot forced a change in behavior. Hunters began shooting at closer, more ethical distances. By the late 90s, the number of hunters climbed back up to around 1.6 million. In all fairness, this increase could be partially because the drought ended and water returned to the prairies. Wherever you land on this topic, it's at a crossroads of science, tradition, and economics. And as I said before, the debate now moves to the Senate. Moving north to the Boundary Waters. For those of you who haven't been living and breathing this one, here's the quick and dirty on the situation. This is America's most visited wilderness, over 1 million acres of boreal forest, and a network of some of the cleanest lakes on the planet. In January of 2023, we thought the debate was over. The Department of the Interior signed a 20-year mining ban covering 225,000 acres of Superior National Forest. The ban was the result of years of science and over 675,000 public comments. But here's the catch. The ban only protects the watershed, the land sitting right at the headwaters of the wilderness. There's a Chilean-owned company called Twin Metals that wants to build a massive copper sulfide mine right there. Look, this isn't about digging a hole in the ground. It's about the chemistry. Sulfide-ore doesn't play nice with water. And in a place defined by its lakes, this is a recipe for a permanent disaster. When you mine sulfide ore, it hits the air and water. It creates sulfuric acid. If it leaks, it doesn't stay on the mine site. It flows north, straight into the heart of the Boundary Waters. Pollution in this watershed would put clean water, wildlife, and the entire local outdoor economy at risk. Once polluted, these waters cannot be restored. Now, proponents argue this is an issue of national security. They say we need these minerals, copper, nickel, and cobalt, to power our electric grid and get away from foreign oil. They see the land as a lockbox that needs to be opened. But for the sporting community, this is about the health of America's wild places, protecting clean water, and the durability of conservation protections. The House has already passed the House Joint Resolution 140 to kill that 20-year mining ban. Now it's sitting in the Senate. And there's a 60-day superpower clock ticking toward a late April expiration. The trick is that they're using a legislative shortcut, the Congressional Review Act, to wipe out decades of science. That should worry anyone who cares about stable policy, no matter which side of the aisle you're on. Right now, Senators Smith and Klobuchar are bleeding that clock dry, hunting for crossover votes to kill that resolution before April. If they hold out, the clock expires, and the 20-year mining ban remains in place. If they don't, the law essentially bars any future administration from passing a substantially similar rule. At that point, the only way to get those protections back is through a new and specific act of Congress. And do you want to know how the slang term, an act of Congress, came to be? It's because getting 60 votes in Congress was historically difficult. And in modern politics, forget about it. This political maneuver sets a very dangerous precedent. Call your senator, tell them no on House Joint Resolution 140. Closer to my home in Texas, we have a shell game happening out west. Customs and Border Protection removed the physical wall from the Big Bend National Park, but as of today, the Department of Homeland Security is still fast-tracking the 30-foot steel right across Big Bend Ranch State Park. And get this, to get those shovels in the ground faster, they've waived 28 federal laws. That's right, that's 28 federal laws. Clean Water Protections, Endangered Species Acts, just bypassed in the name of speed. Just last week, on March 12th, a coalition of 132 conservation groups and local Texas business sent a formal letter to the Senate Committee on Appropriations. They're demanding a total funding ban on the border wall construction for both Big Bend National Park and Big Bend Ranch State Park in the upcoming Homeland Security Appropriations bill. Look, let me be clear. This is about border security. If a wall is truly what's needed to keep our country safe, then we should do that. But my take, you can't just skip the homework. If you're going to build something that changes the landscape forever, you owe it to the land and the people to do the impact studies first. And honestly, these are the guys on the ground. The 5 border sheriffs in the Big Bend sector issued a joint statement opposing a continuous physical wall. They say a continuous wall just isn't practical for this kind of terrain. And they'd rather see money go towards better tech and more boots. We need to protect the legacy of these wild places. We want the future generations to look back and say that we were responsible stewards. The goal is to slow things down so we can do the responsible thing and conduct proper impact studies. Call your representative and your senator. Tell them, I'm a voter and a sportsman. I want a total funding ban on the border wall construction included in the next appropriations bill. Let's get to some good news. American Rivers just confirmed that 2025 saw 100 dams removed across 30 states. Think about that number. 4,893 miles of river finally running free again. That's more than a record. It's a total reconnection of a system. When you see a river finally unlocked, it's like watching the veins of the country finally starting to breathe and move again. It's a record for a reason, and it's a massive win for anyone who carries a fly rod. We've now removed 2,350 dams since 1912. And here's another little hit of Texas pride. Sorry, playing a little favoritism to the Lone Star State. It's the 40th anniversary of the Toyota ShareLunker program, and Lakes J.B. Thomas and O.H. Ivy are trading heavyweight blows. Tristan March of Atlanta reeled in a 13.65-pound bass on Sunday, and Carl Self of Spicewood followed with a 13.73-pounder on Monday night, both within 24 hours of each other. Think about that. Absolute giants, back-to-back in less than 24 hours. That's a hell of a run for Texas water. And it shows that the 40th anniversary of this program is starting off with a bang. And let's look at O.H. Ivy. 62 legacy-class fish in just 6 years. That's not luck. That's world-class management meeting world-class genetics. It's the gold standard of sportsmen and biologists working together. Finally, I have a major update on a story we've been following closely. The plan to eradicate every mule deer on Catalina Island. The sharpshooters are officially grounded. A coalition of hunters and residents, the Coalition to Save Catalina Island Deer, filed a lawsuit to block the plan, targeting the Catalina Island Conservancy and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. The court just granted a temporary stay. So for now, those helicopters are staying on the tarmac. No sharpshooters, no aerial gunning, at least until the court gets to look at the fine print and decide if the state unlawfully bypassed the California Environmental Quality Act. It really comes down to finding the balance between long-term ecological goals and the immediate reality of the people who live on that land. The Catalina Island Conservancy has defended their plan, stating that the island's natural ecosystem and thriving deer population are simply mutually exclusive. However, the state has mostly remained quiet publicly while moving ahead with the permit. And that silence is exactly what this lawsuit is targeting. And here's the irony. The Los Angeles County Fire Chief is saying that without the deer, the fine fuel on the island will build up, creating a fire risk. So you might save a plant only to watch the whole island go up in smoke, as the fire risk to the city of Avalon spikes. This stay is a massive win for the local residents and hunters, who've been saying that management is way better than eradication. For now, the deer have a reprieve, and it feels like the reasonable people in the room, the ones asking for management instead of a massacre, just got a whole lot louder. And that's the news for the week. I've put links in the show notes. Do me a favor, go check up on your representatives, see how they're voting, and hold them accountable for it. We'll be back next week with more from the field. Until then, sporting conservationists, stay wild, stay free, and stay informed. And that's the news.